Hello and welcome to the FatBOSS guide to Brackenspore in Highmaul, and in this video the mechanics and information on display only applies to heroic and normal difficulty.
Now this boss consists of a lot of friendly ads that you need to utilise and a lot of enemy ads that you really need to know how to deal with, otherwise things are going to get very messy. But overall there's a lot of group play, but quite a lot of little bit of individual play as well, which is really quite nice.
Now before we go in and talk straight about the ads, we're going to talk about the main boss abilities first. For the tanks to worry about is an ability called Rot. This is just your standard stacking tank debuff. Taunt on around 2 or 3 stacks, it just leaves a dot on you that ticks. Also what the boss will cast at the tanks is something called Necrotic Breath. This is a breath in a cone in front of the boss that will deal quite a large amount of magical damage, but it'll also reduce your healing that you take while the breath is active by 99%, which means if you're not on a lot of health when this breath comes in, you're pretty much screwed. The breath doesn't hit too hard, but it is very important that you just do keep your tanks topped, full health, before this breath does come in, because you cannot heal them at all. It's also a good idea to give your tank external cooldowns for every single one of these, especially if he is low, or for the tank to use cooldowns himself. And because it is a frontal cone, make sure you do have the boss facing away from the raid, and if you are one of the tanks in the encounter who isn't currently tanking him, don't stand in the breath either, only one of you need to stand in it.
Now there are some high movement parts of the encounter, and it's very important that you deal with the necrotic breath carefully during this, because if you need to move the boss, you're going to turn it and it's going to go all over everybody. So if you do need to move the boss, make sure you got it pre-planned ahead of time, make sure that the breath isn't coming in or it's just came in, and then move the boss, because otherwise you're just going to kill everyone. Now the boss's main ability is Infesting Spores. After a short cast, the boss channels and inflicts a nature damage dot on the whole raid, which stacks up to 10. So during the initial stages of this dot, the damage isn't very high, but once everyone is on 10 stacks, the raid is going to take a huge amount of damage. So when this does come in, you do need to use healing cooldowns, as it is the hardest hitting thing in the entire encounter. Now there are more ways of dealing with this ability rather than just spamming healing cooldowns for each one, and these are with the beneficial mushrooms.
Now as you may have noticed, they are green mushrooms that spawn anywhere in the room, and it does seem to be completely random. When these mushrooms spawn, they do absolutely nothing, however you can heal them, and if you do decide to heal them up to full health, it will give a beneficial aura around itself that will start pulsing healing on the entire raid, and the amount the mushroom heals is far more than any of your cooldowns will heal. So when this Infesting Spores ability is about to come in, it's a good idea for your entire raid to move over to a green mushroom, or stand still if the green mushroom luckily spawn on top of you, heal the mushroom up to full, and it will completely counteract the Infesting Spores ability. One thing to note about these mushrooms is that the moment they spawn, they start to slowly degrade and start dealing damage to themselves. The amount of damage that they take actually increases over time until the point it actually one-shots them, so you can't keep these mushrooms up forever. So while these mushrooms are up, it's probably a very good idea for you to assign so many healers to heal your tanks, while the rest of the healers literally just spam the living shit out of the mushroom. Now the other mushroom that spawns in the fight is the blue mushroom. This one doesn't spawn as much as the green one does, however this one's far more important for your raid. Once this mushroom does reach 100% health, it again, like the green one, will put an aura around itself that increases the haste of friendly targets by 30%, and it also increases your mana regeneration by a shit ton. You essentially cannot go while you're stood next to this shroom.
So of course this mushroom is a hell of a lot more useful for the entire raid rather than the green mushroom. Yeah, the green mushroom pretty much keeps you constantly topped up, however if you have 30% haste and unlimited mana, healers won't struggle out healing the Infesting Spores. However, of course, all of your DPS are going to get this 30% haste increase, which is pretty much like having a Bloodlust. It's pretty much the Bloodlust Infinite Mana shroom. So if this shroom is up and another green one is up, out of the two, 9 times out of 10, you're always going to go to the blue one, because 1, they are more rare, and 2, they give you a shit ton more damage on the boss and his ads.
And when the Infesting Spores does go off while you are stood on top of a blue shroom, it's a really great idea to still assign healers to keep that blue shroom up, just to stop it from dying, because the longer it's up, the quicker the boss is going to die. Now there's also a bad mushroom that can spawn called a Mind Fungus. This will always spawn on a random player's location, and because there's not really any AoE or cleave effects in this fight that you can't prevent, you just have your entire raid stacked up for the whole encounter just because of these Mind Fungus shrooms. All they'll do is just put an aura around them that reduces your casting speed by 75%. When this mushroom does spawn, it doesn't have a lot of health. You just want all of your melee to immediately switch to it and just blow it up. It should die literally within 2 seconds.
Now, apart from the Mind Fungus, there are some other very evil ads that are coming to get you, and the first of which is the Fungal Flesh Eater. Now, this is a huge ad that spawns by the shoreline, and he has a couple of abilities that if you don't deal with, you're just going to flat out die. It just really, really hurts. And the first of which is Flesh Eater. Now this is a buff that increases his damage dealt, attack speed, and casting speed by 10%, and this stacks up. So it will just constantly stack out throughout the entire fight. You can't stop it in any way. And the reason this is really bad is because of another ability he has called Decay. This is an interruptible cast that will deal a huge amount of damage to all players in the entire encounter area. Now this cast is relatively slow at first, but if left for a long time, the cast will become too fast to interrupt reliably, and you're just going to start taking loads of damage because his stacks are too high. So really this fella needs to die as soon as possible. So DPS should be focusing down this ad over the boss, and a rotation of interrupts need to be set up. We had 3 melee DPS on a rotation, and this was more than enough. To be honest, you could probably get away with 2, but the more interrupts you have there, the merrier.
One thing to note about this Fungal Flesh Eater is that it does hit quite hard, so whoever's tanking the boss probably doesn't want to tank this ad as well. So the off tank, the tank that is trying to drop his rot stack, should pick this guy up and tank him side on so you don't also get hit by the breath from the boss. There's also another ad that spawns called Spore Shooters. Now these guys only have one ability called Spore Shoot. What they'll do is target a single player in the raid, and they'll shoot a projectile towards that player, which deals a high amount of nature damage once it hits them, but it also does damage to all targets within 8 yards of that location. Now with everyone stacked in the raid the entire time, this is a massive problem because you're just going to AoE down everyone in the entire raid if you're stood within the raid when this comes in. However, this projectile can be completely intercepted, which means if done correctly, no one in the raid will take any damage apart from the person who's blocking the projectile.
So what we did is that we sent out a ranged DPS per Spore Shooter to intercept the projectile. One thing about this projectile though is if you're standing right in front of him, the projectile can just spawn behind you and then just go straight into the raid anyway, so do keep your distance. That's why you normally wouldn't send melee DPS out to deal with it, because 1, they have to run all the fucking way, but 2, you're probably not going to even intercept the projectile.
These Spore Shooters pretty much take priority over everything, except the Mind Fungus, because that dies so quickly. So you want to kill the Spore Shooters first, then the Flesh Eaters, and then the boss, and you want to keep that mindset throughout the entire fight. Now right at the start of the fight, there are 2 flamethrowers that one person can click on each. And the reasons why you have these flamethrowers is because you need to stop the spread of an ability called Creeping Moss.
So these patches of green moss spread and grow across the room slowly but surely, and if you just leave them unattended, you'll be completely swamped. And the reason that this is bad is because that any player standing in them will take high ticking damage, as well as they will be slowed by 50%, and also any enemies standing in them will gain 2% of their health back per 2 seconds, which means if the boss is standing in it, you're never gonna kill the boss.
That's gonna be some big fucking hills.
When a player interacts with the flamethrower, you will be given an extra action button and a heat meter. Now using the extra action button will spray out fire from the flamethrower and destroy any creeping moss in front of you. Now every bit of moss that you do destroy will give you a stack of burning infusion, which will increase your damage and healing dealt by 10% per stack. However, a stack of this drops off every 2 seconds, assuming you haven't got a new stack. So say you've just cleared out a bunch of creeping moss, you might have 15 stacks or something, it'll quickly go down. So really, considering it's a pretty shit job because you're running around setting fire to everything the entire fight, it's not really much of a prize. Another thing you need to note is that also when you are firing the flamethrower, you will generate heat. If the heat reaches the cap, then you will not be able to use the gun for 10 seconds, and then the gun will start cooling down, rather than if you stop the cast, the gun will start cooling down immediately after 2 seconds. So never hit the cap, because you're just going to completely and utterly destroy yourself, really, because you're not going to be able to set fire to as much things as you really need to, because if you don't keep on top of it, as I said, it's pretty much a wipe.
The best classes to assign to this role really are just classes that have high movement speed. So rogues are awesome because they have burst of speed, shamans you can do it with Ghost Wolf, druids you can use cat form with all your speed increased cooldowns. It just makes clearing them a lot quicker, and you'll be far more effective at doing it than other classes.
One thing to note from a difference from beta is that you can actually use offensive abilities while using the flamethrower. This might mean that you want to assign ranged if you're really struggling, because at least they'll be able to do damage to the boss while they're outside. One really important thing that you need to keep in mind if you are doing the flamethrowers, if the boss starts casting infesting spores and you have no way of surviving it, another reason why rogues are amazing, because you can just cloak it, but if you have no way of surviving it, you need to get back. The fire can wait. You need to get back, otherwise you're just going to die from this debuff without a very heavy damage reduction. But overall, this task can take a little while to get used to, especially managing the heat. It can be a little bit foreign, but really knowing where and when you need to go and clear the moss really kind of grows and just changes throughout every single different fight. The main thing is just keep the moss away from the boss and keep the moss away from anywhere that you're going to need to stack, i.e. where the mushrooms are, and to be honest, you should be absolutely fine.
So providing you can actually keep the moss at bay, and you'll manage to deal with all the other mechanics that are in play on the fight, this boss is relatively easy, and using these tactics you shouldn't struggle with it. But thank you very much for watching, guys. If you did enjoy this video and it helped you out, please do drop us down a like, it helps us out a lot. And if you'd like to see any more of our Highmaul guides, please do click up on the annotations you see on your screen now, and it'll take you straight to those videos. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.